Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Therapist podcast. I'm Sindee Gozansky, your host. Today, it is my true privilege and pleasure to introduce you to Sibel Ozer. Sibel is a psychotherapist, artist, author, and lifelong spiritual seeker. Her work in the field started as a clinical psychologist in Turkey. Following the 1999 Adapazari Earthquake, she received training in trauma intervention methods and introductory art therapy and extended her private practice to serve survivors in the field. Subsequent to her move to the United States in 2000, Sibel received postgraduate training in gestalt therapy, and I seldom meet another gestalt-trained therapist, so I'm excited about our conversation. And she also trained in equine-assisted psychotherapy. In 2007, she graduated from Naropa University with a master's degree in transpersonal counseling psychology with a concentration in art therapy. She has counseled refugees who are survivors of war, trauma, and torture that led her to further specialize in sensory motor psychotherapy, a somatic approach to working through traumatic experiences. Over the years, she has worked with hospice patients in healthcare settings and in private practice. She published her first book, Stories of My Art, in 2021, and is now working on her second book, Heart-Centered Psychotherapy, Realigning with Instinct, Intuition, and Inspiration. She has 2 grown-up sons, resides in Cincinnati, Ohio, enjoys rowing on Lake Ellsworth, Michigan, communing with nature at their lake cottage, yoga, tango, and traveling. I know we're going to have a most amazing conversation with another heart-centered therapist. Welcome, Sibel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. It's a pleasure. It seems meant to be. You reached out to me and said, I'm writing a book titled Heart-Centered Psychotherapy. Maybe we could, talk about working from this modality and this approach. And here we are. So let's do it. I'd love to start because of your incredible background and experiences in Turkey. Maybe you could bring us back a little to that part of your life and then what you experienced in coming here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking with my younger son this morning, who's junior in college, and that at that time in life where he's yet unable to see the future. So one of the things I was telling him was how life and our destiny seem to collaborate with us in how our life unfolds. I did not necessarily start thinking I would become a trauma therapist. It was the context in my life that sort of shaped it. So shortly after I graduated with a degree in clinical counseling, we had this major earthquake not far from the city where I lived in Istanbul, about an hour away, but we did feel some of it. And there was some destruction in certain parts of the city. But over 35,000 people lost their lives. And of course, loss of home and bodily harm, not to mention actual death losses. So huge devastation. And we were so grateful and happy that groups of both Americans and Israelis came to train us to work in the field with trauma because of their expertise. I got my EMDR training there from a group of American volunteers. I had my first encounter with an art therapist from the group of Israelis because we didn't at the time have art therapy. We would just have a couple of teachers visit, maybe give a weekend workshop, but no master program at the time, no access to books even where you could educate yourself. Yeah, it was this major tragedy that started me on the road to becoming an expert in trauma, and that sort of continued to unfold after we moved here. I happened to always find myself working with different trauma populations, which then led me to seek the next training and the training after that with whatever is latest that we think will be most helpful. Because all of us want to be helpful. And there is this inherent dilemma to what we do, in the sense that we learn all these theories and even techniques, and then what might end up helping another human being who's sitting from across from us, regardless of their diagnosis, who knows what they need in that moment? There is that dilemma of not really, despite years and years of education and training, not knowing what will be most helpful.
Yeah, I just want to say it's so brave the way you describe that, being, a very, very experienced, highly trained therapist. And yet that does happen. I exactly know what you're talking about. And that's when we realize, too, I think, that the tools aren't going to get us there, or a specific intervention may not. We may have to call on something bigger, something that we don't even know is in the room, whether it's something spiritual or something intuitive. We're going to talk more about this, Sibel, but this is what makes me excited about our conversation, because you have all of these trainings in like EMDR, something very tool based, I guess. And yet you operate so much from a heart centered approach and relying on relational work and intuition and things like that.
Yeah. The reason, and I do want to follow your question, you wanted me to start with Turkey, and then I
Of course.
digressed, but I've always followed the measuring stick of what works, what helps. I've been a huge fan of Irvin Yalom, who everybody's familiar with, I'm sure, and he has been one of the earlier ones pointing out to the importance of the relationship and not being afraid to ask his clients. He actually even wrote a book where he was paying attention to what was happening in the session, what he thought was working and helping, and invited his client to do the same. And there's this book. And it's, I think, striking the differences, and something which in our profession we haven't paid close enough attention to. We seem to always divert back to our theories and techniques as, wanting to hold on to the belief that those are what we should focus on. And again, I also want to always be really clear not to ever think that I have anything against evidence based methodologies or learning or the accumulation of college. So it's not a matter of either or. We want all of that. And we also want to make sure we're listening to our clients. What is working? What is helping? And from the time Yalom started doing that and writing about it, and I've been doing it for a lifetime, I actually do it after every session, asking my clients, what was it that stood out to you today? And very often it's not what I thought would stand out.
Not what you thought. Sibel, I love that. Everybody, that's gold, right? What was it that stood out to you today?
Yeah. And when we listen, what our clients are reporting back, that is helping to them so often has to do with some element of the relationship where we were able to communicate to them that we really, truly, deeply care. This to me is confounding to this day. You would think it would be obvious that we care and cherish our clients. If we're not afraid to profess it, that we love our clients. And of course, the love I'm talking about is not a sexual love, it's not a sentimental love, it's not an unboundaried. We want to, of course, hold the sanctity of the therapeutic relationships without engaging in dual relationships, always holding the confidentially sacred, yet also being able to not afraid to say that there is caring at the heart of this profession. I think all of us come to it because we have a genuine, first of all, curiosity, interest, but also love of other human beings. Just like, artists that go to art school go with their creativity. And we've heard in many instances how through the extreme critiquing that goes on, that a lot of their creativity can be curbed. They get lost in ideas of right and wrong. And I think there's a version of that happening for us in the world of therapy and therapy training, where that inherent, true, deep caring gets, for whatever reason, associated with unprofessionalism. And so I see this in students all the time. They are trying to suppress it, or those more seasoned therapists that actually come to realize that no, this is a good part of the medicine we have to offer, and we can offer it generously. No harm ever comes of it. We still are a little shy talking about it in public.
We are. Absolutely. And for anyone who's listened to this podcast before, they know that I talk about that it's okay to love your clients just as you described. I say that we lead with love. I teach my master's level students, like, oh, look how much you show your care and your love for that client. And in turn, they offer it back, right? And all of a sudden, you have this amazing connection and relationship where healing can happen. I think that's what makes it so important.
Yeah. And as I was saying, that's what the clients report back when we ask them what worked, what helped. It's those little moments where either we were able to be human and our eyes welled up with what they were sharing, or we reached out a comforting handhold or a hug, or just a human response ends up really touching them half the time, way more than all the theories and techniques. Again, not that I'm against them, but the problem I find is the overvaluation, which is a general Western paradigm, right? We overvalue the intellect and rationality, and we have really undermined the rich, vast healing capacities that our heart centers hold and the sharing of that. And it's almost also for me about who's in the driver's seat. So it's again, I always use the things that I learned, but how I end up learning them is never pre planned. So rather than leading with my mind, if I can sort of let go of all I've learned and just sink into my heart space and be utterly open minded, first of all. But also, I think it requires a certain element of humility that we can acknowledge.
Not knowing that you're going to come in with this humility and not knowing and being okay with that.
Yeah. As opposed to holding on the expertise. It's interesting. The more we learn, it should be the wisdom paradigm goes that the more I know how much I don't know. But what sometimes happens is that the more people invest in their knowing, the more they get sort of stiff around, oh, I know what will help you. Let me tell you about this technique or this theory. This is what'll help you. As if people are machines in need of fixing. And of course, we're not. We are much more complex than any, even if we have a very specific diagnosis. I remember way back when I worked with children with Down syndrome, which is a genetic condition, very clear diagnosis with certain traits. No two kids were alike.
Right.
So we are so much more complicated and rich. So the need for this open mind and humility is there. And when we can approach our sessions in this way, we are able to access intuition, instinct, inspiration. So there are these collaborative forces, I think of them, around us that are willing and eager to help if we can quiet the mind enough and open to this space so that they can drop into our consciousness and come into the field through us, and often end up being just what our client needed. The most helpful thing, which, like I said, we could not possibly have known. My clients surprise me almost every single session with, what transpires and what ends up being needed, it rarely is what I thought would unfold, or as I think about them between sessions, what I thought would come up next. It's always something different.
Yes, yes. And Sybil, it's the way you describe it too, of being there with these collaborative energies around us of instinct and intuition and wisdom, almost like you open yourself to become a vessel in some ways that then they will transpire through you and into the room, into what the client needs. And all of a sudden, there's that knowing or an answer or an aha for the client. Of course, we all want this. What helps you even prepare to be in that space? And I'm sure it's different for everyone, but you've been doing this a long time and you've worked in extremely traumatic spaces where people are survivors and in terrible situations. So, how do you like prepare your own kind of human vessel to do this?
Yeah. Especially because I'm also wanting to reach young therapists. I do want to start with saying that it is good and important that we're keeping records and that we
Mhm.
are reading through our records of previous sessions before we start a session. But I think
Excellent.
what I have issue with is a high attachment to a treatment method where, because you're giving the time to think about your client and think of what might help with them, that you come up with an agenda of what is going to unfold. So as opposed to that, yes, let's do that. Let's even have our therapy plans as long as we're willing to completely let go of them. So the way I prepare is very much like you were describing. I actually pray that I might get out of the way so that what will be most helpful for the client in their highest interest, for that to be able to come through me or unfold in this collaborative space that we share.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Thank you for
often
sharing
light a
that with us.
candle. Sometimes I find myself praying even in the middle of a session. Sometimes I'll secretly reach out to a client's helper if they're there, and sometimes an ancestor will come through. So it's really, the psychic space has so many layers to it. What we call consciousness is such a fluid arena. We have our own psychology that we know or not to different levels, but then we have our personal unconscious. And then we have the collective unconscious that Jung talked about. And then we have transpersonal realms. So there are just so many layers at any point where
Yeah.
we share space with one another. And it's also, there's chemistry in the mix, right? The meeting of
Yes.
two people, our field changes, we impact one another. So it's really so wonderfully mysterious. So I guess I'm encouraging younger therapists to, even as they continue their studies and their learnings, to create an allowing and a permission to sink into and to become comfortable with all that they don't know,
Mm.
because this is part of the playing field in our world. We will never know too many things, not even about psychology, but about what happened in the hour previous to the session.
Right.
So much can transpire that can even happen at an unconscious level for the client. So the client themselves might not yet know what it is they need. But if we're both willing to sink into our heart space, wish to involve all the helpful energies around us, open up to the universe, and slow down. Of course, that's another big one that's rarely taught. If we're willing to slow down and listen, just not with our ears, but with our heart's ears, then we're able to have a session that's a little more special than an ordinary one.
Oh, absolutely. We teach very similarly. I'm always encouraging newer therapists to slow things down, slow their sessions down, slow themselves down. And even as you're describing that, how do we open ourselves up to access whatever else is there, whether it's something spiritual or some other helper? One of my very first supervisors said, you can just sit with your hands on your lap and turn your hands up. Like they receive, an openness. So if I'm feeling stuck or something, I still do that. Oh, I still
Beautiful.
do that to just try to open up to
Yeah.
some other source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for most of us seasoned therapists, we get there in 20, 30 years' time naturally. It's our experiences that teaches us this. But I find it's a bit of a travesty that so much time has to pass. I really want younger therapists to be taught a little bit more about these dynamics because I think currently training programs have really veered so much heavy on the cognitive learning, the theories and the techniques, which again, I'm not against, but there's absolutely no mention of anything having to do with heart and caring. And for heaven's sake, we're in a caring profession. It should really be at least half of what we're talking about, and it's missing. And it's not even only missing. As I talk with young therapists, often I find that it's discouraged. It's associated for whatever reason with either not being scientific or evidence based or not being professional. But
Right.
true deep caring is not mushy sentimentalism. It is something very sacred and very helpful, and in my opinion, essential to what we're about, to what we're doing. And when it's there, our clients respond to that. And like I was saying, sometimes they're surprised by it. Clients have thanked me for being human. And I think, of course, why are you thanking me? If I lose my humanity under the cloak or role of clinicianship, something is amiss.
Yeah.
Because one of the most healing things is universality. This was one of the things Yalom brought up as he was talking about what works in group therapy. All of us benefit from hearing that this horrible shame we're feeling or this thing we're going through that feels only we could be as stupid as letting that happen. Actually, no, it's way more common. Even this therapist that seems so collected and in a good place. Oh, even they felt that at some point in their life. I've never seen that not be helpful.
So helpful. Exactly. And I'm with you completely on this. I'm often asked by, a newer therapist, like, oh, I was told in school that you have to keep your emotions in check. It's not okay to get teary with your clients. And I'm like, wait a second, throw that out the window. Or to be professional and not bringing their humanity into the room because it feels too much like self-disclosure when it's not self-disclosure. It's being a human. It's being a human and a therapist, being your whole self. And how do you bring that into the therapy space? Because that's your healing tool.
Thankfully, we already have concepts for this, and we can clarify that we're not talking about, of course, the therapist starting to cry to the extent that the client now is consoling the therapist. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the use of self, the beloved concept from gestalt therapy,
Yes.
in service of the client. We're talking about universality so that they know that they're not alone in the universe going through whatever it is they're going through. Because half the time, it's not only what we're suffering with that creates deep agony, but it's the idea that we're the only one. All of us, when we feel heard, understood, mirrored, or have a sense that, oh, you too, or other people have gone through that, whatever it is we might have gone through, including torture, it lightens up. it does lighten up a little bit. I'm not saying it alone cures people, but it needs to be a part of what we're offering. And fortunately, in training programs, we teach otherwise. This idea of being some kind of a mirror that is void of emotion or any humanity, it is, first of all, not realistic. Even if we're taught that and we're trying that, it's pretend. And clients, just like children, see through that and feel through that anyway. So it doesn't even work.
It doesn't work. And I think it like preempts the therapist to also default to the intellectualism instead of to the emotional frame.
Yes. And it's rarely as helpful, especially having worked a lifetime with trauma. So most of human struggle happens not in the mind per se. A lot happens in the mind. I'm going to take that back. But it's not that we don't know what needs doing, is that the rest of our body is not feeling or collaborating. Let's say when the earthquake is over, people know the danger is gone now. There's no reason for me to feel fear. But the body trembles. The body still holds the shock of the trauma and needs releasing. So, more often than not, it's bottom up processes, the involvement of the rest of us, where true healing comes from.
Exactly. And I think often, like we were saying at the beginning, that includes contact because of that aloneness of experiencing that fear, that trauma so alone, to be able to like reestablish safe, caring contact. And it might start with the contact of loving hug through the eyes or whatever. And then it just can also morph into something else. Some people don't even shake hands anymore. That just surprises me. I know some of it's pandemic holdover and everything, but it always gets to me. I think people need contact at some level, and it helps with our care. So I guess going back to what you were saying, so fascinating and so hard to be able to have that ability to enter your session with the unknown, like being okay with the unknown, the unknowable. You call it the principle of the unknowable. New therapists don't like to do that. I get it. They're very nervous. We're kind of like, okay, I think I'll be able to figure it out. Why? Because we're open to those other collaborating energies. But how do you help somebody really get a little more comfortable with the unknown?
I love this question because even as I invite really an opening up to not knowing, I think it helps us tremendously also to cultivate certain things that are always in our back pocket, never not right. For example, things I have learned from gestalt therapy, the paradoxical of theory of change, which basically postulates that emotions, we think we have to escape from them. But the truth is, paradoxically, it's when you allow them, when you move towards them, that they will naturally transform into something else. So I like to teach these generals, how do we work with emotions? All our emotions want from us is a little bit of time and space, ideally non-judgmentally. And then, of course, I think it's important to have a general understanding of the mind, the multiplicity of the mind, and how thoughts and paradigms work quite differently than emotions. So, in my opinion, as much as the education, it's also our personal work that is incredibly important. All of us that sit in the seat of the therapist really have ought to have done and maybe continue to do for a lifetime, or periodically revisiting, as Yalom himself had shared. So doing our own therapy work, so much of what I realized worked and helped came when I was in the seat of therapist, and I'm overly educated. I've learned a lot of things.
Yes. But sometimes from our very own therapists, we also learn the experience because we can forget what it's like to be the client.
Yes. And then mindfulness. I think Naropa was such a gift to me in the sense that it taught us therapists how to be mindful and to generate a mindfulness practice, not only as a part of knowing ourselves, but also as part of being able to relax into that not knowing,
Mm.
having cultivated the ability to track ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, what is going on in our bodies. And so you can relax into the not knowing because you can always ask. Right, that's the here and now approach. Again, Gestalt has gifted us, and Yalom so often reminds us to come back to. Anytime we're confounded, we don't know where things are going, all we have to do is slow a little bit down, check in. What is there now? What is there in the feelings? What is going on in the mind, the body? We can always ask. We don't need to know. But
Yes,
we need to be open minded and attuned enough to be able to ask the right questions. And they come to us when we are relaxed enough and not lost in the labyrinths of our minds, thinking we have to figure it out all by ourselves.
exactly. There's such a gift that the therapist who can get into that relaxed space, that relaxed attunement, and be comfortable with the not knowing. And like you said, then you have your own response. You still are connected with yourself. And so, whatever is coming up for you, you can use that in the here and now. You can experience your feeling in that interaction with the client in the moment. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe you name that. It could be anything. But I think it's trusting that process, which includes the self of therapist, in the actual therapy process, that it's a little hard to teach, but it's so worth it if you can experience that. And it takes guts to try it. It's just a little bit of a risk to try something new and to be organic about that.
And in
And
some ways, it doesn't need to be taught because people that come to the field, they have probably been doing that for years
yeah,
naturally already. Like
right.
most of us have our own wounds. And so know what things are like, first of all, or we've been the people, other people, either in our family or friends, have been coming to us because, yeah, this is, I think, what Rogers was the one who said therapists are better chosen rather than educated.
Oh,
You
I
know,
love that.
isn't that great?
So great, Sybil. Yes.
Because this is a natural tendency. Some of us just love other human beings, are interested in them, and want to hear and witness what it is they're going through and have a natural capacity for empathy. And that is the biggest gift. And of course, then all the knowledge we accumulate and all the techniques we learn, they help. They are part of the mix. But as long as we don't forget the starting point and what matters the most, which is this authentic presence, hopefully, as we're across from another human being, treating them as a sacred being who happens to be going through maybe a tremendous, maybe a small challenge, regardless, but somebody who demands respect, who's not less than. We're not the expert there to fix them. We're
Right.
just a fellow human being who are in awe of this other human being with how resilient they are. And it always baffles me how people judge therapy,
Mhm.
right? Oh, the clients that go to therapy, those poor people that need help. The more I do this job, I think of my clients are the heroes. I worry
Ah,
more about
absolutely.
the people that are not going to therapy.
Yeah.
Those
It's
are the
incredible.
ones.
Our clients are incredible that they show up and they do this hard work and in turn inspire us and teach us and gift to us that experience. It is very sacred. I absolutely believe that and try to treat it that way and hold it that way. It's a cherishing and leading with love and being able to bring your heart into the room, into that experience. So important. As we talk about these dreamy therapy sessions where you tap into your intuition or this like inner knowing or something innate, can you think of an example where, obviously keeping things confidential, but an example where, oh, I thought I was going to do classic trauma work or EMDR or something with a client, and then this happened?
I think the last 10 years, that's how I really work. It always is like that for me. I never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Maybe I can just recently, there was a session where, so this client has a beautiful job and she recently got promoted. So her job is so idealistic and she is such a good fit for it. So as we're talking about how she's transitioning to the new role and some of the challenges around it, I kept on having this nudge to create some spaciousness to discuss what would it be like if you didn't do this job. And part of
Wow.
me, my mind was saying, hold on, hold on. Her job, first of all, is a great job. I- Thankfully, somebody like her is doing it. She's good at doing it. Why would
Right.
you even go this route?
Yeah.
But as I was inviting it, you know, how she was responding to that, we just ended up having this whole session talking about what it might feel like if she was a small business owner, if she was selling chocolate or had a little tea shop. And at the end of the session, something about this discussion was just what she needed. I wasn't following my mind, who was questioning, wait a minute, why are you following this thread?
Yeah.
Because in any session, there are multiple threads that we could
Exactly.
follow, that we could intellectually justify as this is a very legitimate
Right.
way
Lots of
to move
choice points we
forward,
have.
but they're not necessarily that just right one. And if you are following those more internal nudges, more often than not, I could say at the stage where I am now with my wonderful white hair, it never guides me wrong. And more often than not, it ends up being just what the client needed. And then we're so happy because that's what we really want anyway. We don't want to be right, or we don't need to be the one who knows it all. We want to be helpful.
Yes, we don't want to be right. We're coming with that helper's heart.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that. And especially that word nudges. Be aware, listeners, when you feel a nudge and you're like, wait a second, why would I even bring that up? Her job sounds perfect, but it keeps coming at you. So then maybe you want to pay attention. Again, another gestalt concept. We're always paying attention.
Yeah. And it is important to differentiate, of course, between impulse and intuition. And this is also where the personal work is so important. You don't ever want to be projecting your own things onto the client or have an impulse and blurt it out. It's a way more subtle listening in. And I often will hold a nudge that comes up, you know, hold and hold. And if it keeps on presenting itself, making sure it has nothing to do, it's not just an impulse of my human self, then I will bring it forth. And there's also this wonderful thing around not needing to be right. With the things that we bring forth, we can always present them gently as a suggestion and ask, what do you think about this? Does this resonate? And when I'm following the nudges and the impulses, my clients will tell me sometimes, are you reading my thoughts? That was exactly what I was thinking. And I have no psychic capabilities, but it just comes up when you sink into that place of attunement and open mindedness and willingness to care. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And especially giving us that extra guidance of how do we differentiate between an impulse and the nudge and having patience. I think that's the other thing that goes with slowing yourself down, having the patience as the therapist to sit in it a little bit, just like we ask of our clients.
Less is more always. In Gestalt, there's this idea of background, foreground. You wait to see from out of the background what will come forward. And sometimes it's a little tiny figure, but a session you give, that one little thing, can be so much more valuable than touching out on a million other things. Less is always more, especially I think in today's world with everything happens so rapidly, the way social media functions, the way people are on their phone being bombarded. There's such a immense speediness to the way information is entering the psyche nowadays, reel after reel.
Yeah.
Bombarded, young ones especially, are bombarded constantly. And so
Mhm.
much of it is cloaked under the illusion of some kind of perfection, as if it were possible. And first of all, perfection is not compatible with life. And the psyche really needs time to process things. And current life, I think, goes at a pace where that is rarely ever happening. People don't really know how to truly relax anymore. I don't know when it was last, but one of the last times I was at the beach, which is one of my favorite healing
Oh,
places. I'm walking down and I look at people sitting on the benches, and we are even on our phones at the
yes.
beach now.
Oh,
Everybody's like this. You made it to the beach. Here's the
right.
medicine of the ocean and the sun and the peace.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. So I think we have forgotten how to rest. We are
Mm,
no longer living in sync with nature most of the time.
yeah.
And so the need to slow down, to create permission to just attend to one thing in a session as a therapist, that's teaching something that is a rare find in today's world.
Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. And attending to that. So we don't really have to attend at that depth in our world of social media and phones and all of that. And so that's why it's harder in some ways now to be a therapist and sink into that depth of attending and presence and attunement and not knowing. Yeah. Sybil, I'd love to take a few minutes to also just quickly switch our topic a little bit to your art. For people who are listening, they don't get to see the beautiful background, but Sybil is an artist as well as a writer, and she has beautiful paintings behind her. I want to read a quote that is on your website about art. And it says, I have learned that talent is not as necessary for authentic self expression as I thought, and that persistence and dedication to the craft goes a long way. And you describe art as a sacred practice. So share a little bit with us about some of the art you do. You have painting the divine feminine, mosaic work, response art, and intuitive portraits. And please, everybody, check out her website as well as for her therapy offerings and her book, which is sibelozer.com. And we'll link it to the show notes. But you can look at the beautiful art while she's talking about it.
Thank you so much. And actually, I want to speak a little bit more about being an art therapist because
Okay.
I really, to this day, think of myself less as an artist and more as an art therapist in the sense that I do art to discover things about myself. And for me, this is where the magic resides. Jung was the first one, I think, who said that the hands will solve the riddles with which the mind has wrestled with in vain. So there's this
Mm.
phenomenal reality where when you give yourself permission without the need to be professional, educated, talented, none of which I was. And I thought that was a prerequisite to give yourself even permission to make any kind of art. It turns out none of that is necessary to engage. And when you start engaging the qualities of the materials, which are wide ranging, then what happens during the process, and then again, what the end product offers you. All of these parts of art making are filled with insight, discovery. You give yourself permission to let your hands do whatever it is they do. And then you take a step back and you find out something about yourself that you didn't know. Or you find out what is going to be most helpful to you, because we're always still wanting to be the best selves that we can be. So my art making started through getting involved in art therapy. I had first met an art therapist during the earthquake and then was working with children in the beginning who just naturally go to the materials without any worry about, am I talented? They don't care less. They just use it to express themselves. And somewhere along the way, we lose that ability. And what a shame. And I'm an art therapist, but I'm also a fan of talking about that it is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. For somebody, it might be art. For somebody else, it might be poetry. We really want to think about all the array of different expressive modalities that help create the same result. So I talk a little bit more about painting, which is my primary medium, but I want to make sure people are thinking of the million other things that are therapeutic, including for somebody, it could be crocheting, it could be gardening. Nature is a whole nother realm that is therapeutic. Sometimes have more times, more than we are.
Exactly.
Send your clients into nature after the
Yes, of
therapy
course.
hour.
Your excitement about art therapy is just so palpable. It's amazing to experience it. And of course, I get to see the art behind you. But so you started as an art therapist early in your career.
So people come to art therapy either as a great artist already recognizing the inherent healing qualities, or from the field of psychotherapy, which was my case, where you begin to notice, oh, there's something about this art that clients are expressing. Let me learn more about that. And the more you get into it, of course, endless discoveries of just how and why it is profoundly therapeutic, allowing expression, creating distance from whatever is sometimes difficult, giving words to or expression to things that have no words, holding dualities, which we often struggle with, right? And what matters, it turns out, we started with talent is not needed. All that is needed is authenticity. If you can just allow yourself to do what your hands want to do and you're authentic, turns out your art ends up being powerful, not because of the technical qualities, but because of what it communicates energetically. So, yeah, I am such a big fan, and I think it's deeply impacted how I work as a therapist. I often think of a session as like a blank canvas. I approach it in the same way, not knowing, following the process, allowing things to emerge from the field.
Yes. And the authenticity is in both, for sure. Yeah.
The authenticity is, I think that's really what we all want in life, all want to be more of who we are, regardless of what category we fall under. It's never not good for us to be more who we truly are, who we were born to be. So we want to first and foremost strive and work towards that ourselves, so we can not just talk about it theoretically, but we also, with our presence and our role modeling, showing it to our clients. It's also part of being in the same boat, I think.
Yes. And really, you help us a lot too by recognizing, sure, you can get some competency in a certain technique or theory, and that's great. But what's going to kind of like bring you to the edge is when you can pair it with the authenticity in the room, when you can bring in your authenticity. That will matter more than like the highest level of competency in that specific technique.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because that's what integration really means, isn't it? You learn something, but then you integrate it. And it's only then that it becomes your own. Otherwise, you're parroting something, and it's never going to be as useful to anybody compared to if you have made it your own, put in your own spice and medicine.
So, how did you end up making art your own?
It really started with my art therapy education. I was required to take a painting class. It started with, and I was very intimidated in the beginning because I didn't think I was a good artist. I just was interested in this art therapy that seems to work so well. And then the more I was encouraged by my dear teachers at Naropa University, Michael Franklin, now a dear friend, he always emphasized the importance of developing our own artist identities. I think this is part of also the authenticity, right? Rather than just offering your clients something that you've learned. If you have used it in a way that has benefited you deeply, you're able to just offer it from such a more heart place and a genuine place of knowing, as opposed to just a cognitive knowing.
Yes.
So I just kept at it. I took classes after college, and it started with intellectual interest, and now I can't imagine my life without it. For me, it's like food. It's essential to my well-being. I wouldn't want to do life without it.
Yes. Wow. Sibel, clearly your passion just comes through, and there's so much energy and spirituality in what I've seen of some of your work. So it's really integrated also for you. And it sounds like it's really, you need to do it each day or not be without it.
If I can. Life is not perfect. There have been months I haven't painted, but then I'm writing, or maybe something else is in the forefront. So nothing I say, I really want to say this. I am now very comfortable contradicting myself at the age that I'm at. I say something with a wholehearted belief behind it, and then the next moment I might say the exact opposite, because everything changes from minute to minute, person to person. Yes, I don't want to do without art or painting, but then I go sometimes months where I'm not. And I could feel all bad about that, or I can just go, it isn't happening right now. I'm reading more now, or something else is happening. So everything is quite a bit more fluid. And it's good for us therapists to align with that fluidity in everything that we know and offer.
So true. So true. And that's a practice to be able to embrace that fluidity for sure. Yeah. As we wrap up, and we could keep talking, I'm sure, Sybil, because there's just so much in common here. And I'm excited by our conversation, and I'm ignited to like just try again to be even more authentic in my work. What would you want a therapist listening to this to take away from your words today?
Especially for younger therapists, I want them to have more permission to be themselves, to not be afraid of what comes up in their sessions that doesn't quite fit the teachings they've received. Thankfully, the younger ones are often receiving supervision, which helps. But I want to create permission for their authenticity, permission for their true caring hearts to come back after having been squashed for a while, bring it back, to not hesitate to communicate their caring to our clients. So these are things I'm really wanting to get across more than anything else.
Yes, thank you for that gift. And Sybil, where can people find out more about you and what you offer and your current book and your new book coming out? share a little bit about all of that, because I'm sure people will want to find out more and perhaps connect with you too.
Yeah, I'm always happy to receive anybody reaching out. I always have time for especially young therapists. So my website is the easiest, my name and last name, sibelozer.com. Recently, I joined a holistic collaborative in Cincinnati. We're called One Heart Mental Health Collab.com is our website, and we're offering ketamine assisted psychotherapy. Psychedelics are this new, wonderful field that is just beginning to be legalized. Of course, we're in the beginning
Mhm.
stages. Of course, we want to proceed cautiously, but it is a potentially healing plant medicines
Yes.
that can help people access healing that can be quite a bit more profound and deeper than we're able to offer with our traditional therapies. And
Mm.
we are offering it. We have a medical doctor, we have an
Great.
acupuncturist, I bring in art therapy. So we're
Mm.
doing it with a lot of preparation and integration. So that's another place they can reach me at. But my website for sure, which has my email and phone number, are the easiest way to reach me.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And people can also check out Stories of My Art. They can check out that book on your website, and I think it's probably also on Amazon, but
Yes.
yes,
Yeah, thank
great.
you.
And the progress in the heart-centered psychotherapy, when do you expect that book to come out?
I don't know as of yet. I'm still working on it.
Okay.
Maybe this year, latest next year is what I'm thinking. I always say, what do I know? The goal is that, and life will bring what it does, and we shall see. But I
Yeah.
know that I will get to it in the coming years for
Yes.
sure.
It's so needed. And once that happens, we'll definitely collaborate so that you can be back here and share even more about this amazing work that you're doing and the messages you're putting out into the world, and especially for younger therapists. But for everybody today, I really want to acknowledge you for the work you're doing and the change you're trying to create in the field so that we can be caring and authentic and heart-centered. And it's so needed. And I hope that if you're listening to this, maybe you can share it with a friend who also could use that permission to be yourself, to be authentic. And so I'm going to take that as a gift from you, Sibel. Thank you so much.
My
Oh,
pleasure, total pleasure. Thank you so much for creating this platform.
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of The Heart-Centered Therapist. And remember, you have permission to be authentic and to be yourself and to bring in that deep caring and love for others. And so until next week, stay heart centered.